Wow, do you not ever look us up? It is.
What? What are you
just
talking?
type the whole name out.
No, I'm on the Kasitati Sisters YouTube. That's why. I look it up on my own. Yep, everything looks good.
Okay, everybody, we're trying to test it again. Sorry. We will get this figured out quickly, okay? So we're testing out our microphones again. Please let us know if it is. Does it still sound muffled? No, Sally will tell us. Okay, so the live is on, and we're gonna check the mics. If the mic's not working, guys, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the mics out. We're just gonna talk directly to you, and we're gonna have the background noise, and that's just the way that it's gonna work today. Okay? Yes. Yeah. If we do that, we'll definitely bring that closer, so that you can join us inside the circle. Okay. So if anybody can just adventures. Oh, it's not working. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and take the mics off. Let's bring the camera closer. And this is going to be a lot of fun because you guys get to come take a seat at the table along with us, okay? We'll go ahead and just do without the mics today. Okay, we're here.
That's right. The show must go on.
We're going to make sure to talk out loud. Let us know if you guys can hear what we're talking about. Do we need to come closer? Is this okay? Just want to make sure that it's picking up our volume. Guys, when it's time to start, it's time to start. And we've already dedicated 12 minutes to this microphone issue. And we're going to have to move on, okay? Next week, we'll definitely figure these things out before we come again together next week. All right. So thank you so much, Wells Adventures, for helping us get on track and just letting us know. Just let us know as we go if you can hear us or not. But we are going to go ahead and begin, okay? We've been waiting for this moment the entire week since the last time we got together here at the Morris and we got to talk to Brandon. So if you got to join us last week, you were in for a real treat because Brandon was on with us, Brandon Stafford, and he was here sharing his story and sharing a lot about his journey so far and about the seasons that he's currently walking in. And he shared a lot of uncomfortable truths and a lot of things that that's hard to say out loud. And he was very vulnerable and honest with his story. And so that's what this platform is all about. We really enjoy hearing other people's journeys in life and walking alongside them. And so thank you so much to Brandon last week for joining us here on the stage. Thankfully, the mics did work last week, so we didn't have to yell. But today we have the pleasure of going back into our book series that we have been walking through since for a while now, and walking through Formed Underwater. Here at Dustin Morris, we've been just going through these pages together, kind of taking our time, having an open space for dialogue here, and just kind of how this relates to our life and the questions that we really have to ask ourselves. And if not, this book will definitely bring those questions to the surface. And we've had a lot of time to be able to go through these pages together, and we invite you into that conversation. So thank you so much to our listeners for joining in this journey with us. And if you have not had the chance, you can get this book on Amazon. So this book, Formed Underwater, is a book under our foundation. So all the proceeds for your purchase will go directly back into helping us continue to do what we're doing. And honestly, this is just a great starting point for anybody, wherever it is that you are walking, wherever it is in life's journey that you're currently at. This book you will find yourself in these pages. And that's what I really love about doing this together with my sisters here and getting to walk through them together. But Formed Underwater, we have been walking through the intro, walking through the author's advice about how to walk through this book. We've finally come to chapter 1, and where we left off before was we were right about to get into the nitty gritty of chapter 1, and we're going to begin that today. But before we do so, we're going to have our lovely Edna Fry here, and she is going to walk us through, kind of catch you guys up. Okay, so we're girls catching up, and Edna's going to catch us up on what we've been talking about.
Absolutely. Please forgive me. I'm going through a cold right now, but I will do my best to carry us through this. So, recap for those who are just joining us today. I want to make sure that if it's your first time watching, that you are not left behind, because you are right here, right on time. So, we're just covering chapter 1. Who are you? Who are you? Identity. And so, before you decide where you're going, you must know who are you. Who are you? Yes. And so for this author, for many years, he believed that identity was something that he proved. But then later he realized immediately that identity doesn't work that way. Identity is not discovered at the finish line, but like what Anna said earlier, at the starting point. And it's crucial to know that when a person doesn't know who they are, they borrow identity from other people. They borrow it, they copy it, and that could be from definitions everywhere from culture, success, titles, expectations, family pressure, or even religion. And what I've learned and love about the author is that as he's discovering, he's really getting to really good questions. And one of the questions he asked was, who am I apart from what I do for others? And this is also crucial to know because this question matters more than you realize. It's because when identity is unclear, it becomes exhausting. You keep moving, but you don't feel anchored, and you stay busy, but you do not feel fulfilled. And so last time, as we covered formed underwater, we stopped at a point where the author says, identity answers questions that success never can. And before I cover this part, he began to understand identity is not something God withholds until we perform well. And I think that's so important to know. That identity is something he established before we ever act. And so even with these, he starts to realize that identity answers questions that success never can, which is, am I valuable even if I fail? Am I significant even if no one applauds me? And am I still called even when my plan fails? So you see, we had discovered last time as we spoke that identity is not your income, it is not your education, it's not your role that you play in your church, and it's not your past mistakes or your current limitations. So we're diving in deeper as we're continuing into chapter 1. So you do not want to miss out what we have
Right.
today.
So yeah. Thank you so much, Anna, for walking us through that, doing such a wonderful job. Yes, that is what we've been discussing so far. And so now we're going into this section of chapter 1. It's called the pipeline years. Okay? And this is definitely this story. So, the author, this book was written by my father. And so we're going into this part of the story. And it's so wonderful to be able to be here today and look back and read these pages. And so we're going to go into them today. And if you know us, you know exactly where we're going in the pipeline years here. But Kim, go ahead and start us off.
Yes. So the pipeline years. There was a season in my life that my daughters and I refer to as the pipeline years. We named it later, long after we survived it, because at the time we didn't have language for what we were living through. We were simply enduring. We lived on a street called Pipeline Road, but what that name came to represent was far deeper than an address. It became a marker in our family's memory, a moment in time when everything felt heavy, quiet, and painfully uncertain. Now, every time we talk about the pipeline years, if you've known us since we were children, you know the pipeline home, you know where we grew up, and you'll see us go from our pipeline home right across the street to our church. And I remember moving into our home, to our pipeline home, and it was just such an exciting time. It was so exciting for us, and we were excited to have a home and be right across the street from our church. So that was even better because we also had a home in Arlington, and right across in the backfield was our church. So we always walked from home to church. We didn't have to drive the car. And now here we are again at a different location, a different home, where our church was just right across the street. So So I remember moving in. Our youth also helped us move our things into our home, and it was just such an exciting time as a child looking back, moving into our home at the pipeline.
Mhm. Definitely a lot of excitement moving into the home, new beginnings, new chapter. Moving is always something that's, especially as a child, it's just it's exciting because, you look at your new room and your new space, your area to play, and your backyard, and just like, okay, this is a brand new, fresh start. And so definitely, that kind of event in your life is met with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of hope for what's there to be. Because moving into a home is like a brand new page, right? And it's a new journey and everything that you want to do and dream of, like this is it. Yeah, the possibilities are endless. And so why would there be a page dedicated to that? Why would there be, why is this written in this book? But definitely those memories come flooding back just reading about that. But there's a section, there's a part here of what you just read, and it says, we named it later, long after we survived it. And so right off the back, because at the time we didn't have language for what we were living through. And I think a lot of us can relate to having seasons like that in our life where you're just in the season of survival. There's in the season of survival, and it's not until later, way later, where you can look back at that and recognize it, number one, as a season. Because let me tell you right now, let me just say, praise God, that seasons have they have a time when they come in and they have a time when they end. Okay, it's a season. And so praise God that we can look back and see that season. And here it says, we didn't have language for what we're living through, but now looking back, those were the pipeline years. And we'll get into more of why this season was so significant in the author's life, in our life. And it says we were simply enduring. Sometimes, you have a season where you're just enduring what's happening. Life is lifing. You're not moving into this thing, on offense. You're just kind of getting through the day and whatever life is throwing at you, and you're just enduring every single day. And I also, when I think about the pipeline years, I think about how ironic that name is, because when we moved here, this was just an address.
Yeah.
We live on Pipeline Road, and we're about to see how much.
Okay.
Yeah, you live on
Exactly.
Pipeline
Why?
Road.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and pray for me as we're going through this, because this is a very, but for me, as I read the book, when I first saw the title, I didn't even know what it's about. But I already knew, like you said, everybody knows this street. Everyone knows how much this home means to you guys. And so this is the pipeline, that home is, I remember how excited you guys were. And so you guys have been following our journey. We met when we were 11 in middle school.
Yeah.
And so I do remember just excitement of it. We're living down the street. I didn't understand that because I was at the church before they were. Mm-hmm. And I like down the street because my pastor was already down the street.
Yeah, literally.
Could you mean? And we're just down. There's a house and there's another house. But just to know, we grew up. Even though I didn't grow up in the home with you guys, but I've also grew up in just seeing you guys in this pipeline year. So it might get a little emotional, but understanding that what I'm loving right now, we're finally diving into the questions of why did the author come up with, who are you? Why does these questions even matter to the author? And we're finally getting into like a testimony of things. So I can't wait to just share all the things we're about to get into in the pipeline years.
Exactly, and that's right, Edgar, because this is where our story began. Our friendship began because we met here. And so during the pipeline years for us, that was also the introduction to our friendship, our relationship. Like you said, we met at 11 years old, not knowing we would be here today, all those years later. And so even in this way, you were there also as a witness to the pipeline.
Oh yeah, because I'm not sure if you're ever going to dive into that, but we also had a first job together. So we're working. I'm literally seeing her survive, not realizing. Not realizing now looking back what you're going through in the pipeline. So we're working, and so that's what I said. I really got to see front row seat of the struggles. Not really know the depth of it. So
and it's just so funny because this morning we were helping a family friend, and I didn't know how to collapse the
Wheelchair.
the wheelchair. And Ender's like, oh, you do it like this. And Ender showed me, and I said, oh. And Ender's like, why did I know that? And it's literally from the job she's talking about with Anna.
I was like, follow this way.
Yes.
Huh? All right, this way. And I'm like,
when,
ew.
when she did that, I was like, oh yeah, that's from that job.
Right. Which, unrelated to this, but it goes to show that everything really is, you learn something from every experience in life. And so that job we had at 14, 15 years old, helping people with wheelchairs and mobile assistant devices, and you were able to show her something new today.
It was all connected to the pipeline.
So Kim learned something new, so that's already a win today. But yes, so the author here, he is going into, if you've been following along on this book, the author sets us up in the beginning and kind of gives us a brief overview of his life thus far and what has led him to writing this book. And so walking through chapter 1, now we're going deeper into some of those events that the author briefly talks about. If you guys remember when we spoke about the introduction, the author talking about coming to America and just that hope, that full of life, that full of new opportunity, what's to come, and following my calling and pursuing God's, whatever God has placed in front of me, I'm going to do it. And all of that optimism, and the kind of the same thing Kim talks about with moving into this home, this brand new home. And so right off the bat, we see that the author talks about this time. First of all, the season has a name. And I know that there are many of us watching right now where you can look back and you have some seasons in your life that have a name, a significant time in your life that you refer to as, oh, that blah, blah, blah time. And so here the author takes us through that moment in time in his life, the pipeline years, and saying how this season in his life became a marker in our family's memory, a moment in time when everything felt heavy, quiet, and painfully uncertain. Those years were the saddest, loneliest, and most troubling season of our lives as a family. And for me, as a husband, father, and a provider, they were especially crushing. What made this season so confusing was this: I was doing everything I knew how to do. And we'll go into that some more here on the next page. But here we already see some of the things we can already infer, some of the things that were happening during this season, and seeing that they were the saddest, loneliest, and most troubling seasons of our lives as a family. It's one thing to go through a season by yourself, to have a season where you're feeling all these things by yourself. It's another crushing thing to be going through a season as a family, especially as the husband, the father, the provider, the head of the family. That is a totally different kind of weight, a totally different load.
Yeah, that's very true, Anna, because, just this is from the author's experience and his, I mean, we were in that experience too as a family, but, speaking from my personal experience, like you said, like it's one thing to go through a season by yourself, but it's a whole different game when you go through it as a family. And it just takes me back to, going through a really, really tough season as a family with my children and my husband. And like you said, like the word that can best describe that season is like crushing. Like you don't know like how the next day is going to be. You don't even know how the day is going to be, because you're going through the season in life. Your family is in it. And then every day is just a day of uncertainty, a day of feeling like you're put against like the wall and you don't know what's your next move. And speaking from experience, those things are so hard. They're so hard, and that's why I'm so grateful to be surrounded by a village that literally, intercedes for me and steps in and helps me, not just for myself, but for my family whenever those kind of things happen. But just listening to our author here, how he shares that, it became a marker in our family's memory. Because looking back at our pipeline years, there's so many good memories, and at the same time, like the author writes and explains here, those years were the saddest. They were the loneliest and most troubling season of our lives as a family. And just like you said, the seasons have its beginning and its end. And just like it has the good, it also has those moments in it as well. And looking back, like you said, Anna, you mentioned about how we didn't know it yet, but now looking back, we can name it something. We call it our pipeline years, and how significant that word pipeline is. So just like the pipeline, and I was thinking of it's the same thing like our lives, right? So the pipeline with the pipes underneath the home, and if there's just one little bit of a leak, then the water pressure is inconsistent. It's not as strong. It starts leaking here, creating more damages, and eventually the pipe you know, needs to be changed out. It's the same thing that we see here with the author, how he talks about the saddest, the loneliest, most troubling season. It's just like the pipe. When you think of us in our lives, think of us as a pipeline. It's the same thing like us. Whenever we're going through something, and like first you come into this world, you're excited. Just like the author shared, coming to a new land. Whenever he, gave his life to Christ, and all these new opportunities and things that he thought it was going to be. And as the time is going, as the flow of the pressure is going, life starts happening. Life is happening, maybe some weathering, erosion, whatever it is to this pipe. And slowly but surely, then the pipe starts to crack, and it's trying to wonder what exactly, the four truths that he learned. Like, why am I here? Who am I? It's the same thing like when we talk about the pipes. A bad pipe, it's in our life talks about like metaphorically speaking, it's like our weak habits, our mindset, our structure, identity. The pressure, in the pipe is like the responsibility, the stress, purpose or opportunity when it comes in our lives. And then once we get and we go through the pipeline, which we'll talk more into it. I don't want to go more into it until we get to that part. Okay, so let me just slow it down. But I just think of, like you said, the pipeline, and thinking of the pipes and the system and how things work. And during that time, yeah, a lot of pressure was being added. A lot of times that we went through everything as a family, really things that stuck with us to make us who we are today. And I'm so thankful. I'm very, very thankful of those seasons that we went through together at the pipeline home. And a lot of times those seasons came with a lot of opportunity for my dad to teach us, and take us back to scripture, and take us back to what will sustain us and hold us and show us, and to hold on to that hope that can outlast everything. So
Thank you, Kim, for doing the rest of the episode. What's the what? No, I'm just kidding. Kim definitely took us from the beginning to the middle to the end. And thank you so much for sharing that, Kim. That's very, very, very true. Like you said, the significance in the name pipeline, and you were just sharing about the purpose of the pipe and how it carries something under pressure. Because the pipe and living on pipeline is because you're living on top. The pipeline's there under carrying something under pressure. Exactly. And so the thing is that even in our home at that time, there was the author speaks about being under that same pressure, that same weight. And like you were sharing about your story, and you said how your family also went through a time like that, a season that you can think of, and the one word that's coming to your mind is crushing. It's completely crushing. There's no other way to describe it. Even the words here that the author uses, that saddest, loneliest, most troubling season of our lives, and just thinking about how devastating that is. Like even me right now, even though we've lived this, but even to read it back and just seeing that, yes, it was the saddest. And I think the saddest thing too is reading that it was the loneliest. The loneliest. There's something about that is heartbreaking, is that you can go through a season as a family, and even though you're going through that season as a family, that it's a lot of loneliness. You walk in a lot of loneliness during that time. And then the author tells us exactly why this was the loneliest, saddest, most troubling seasons.
What's interesting when you're going, just hoping to relate to anybody else who's watching this, is that when you're in those years that you actually have a name for it, because I'll dive into mine soon, is you don't think you're going to get out of it. A lot of whys God, why is this happening? Why did you bring me here for this? It always brings me back to the Israelites continuously complaining. I'm not sure if y'all did, but I know looking through the years that I named my struggles, the one that put me under the pressure. Looking back now, I can see it for what it was. But when I was in it, it felt like a long suffering. It felt like forever. And now I look back at it, I was like, that was a short time. But in it, it felt like forever.
Right.
Like, when does this end? Like, what? Okay, I'm learning my lesson. You know, all the things, all the questions that come back. And sometimes in my life, in the present, I say, God, whatever, not there again.
I know.
But you learn so much from being under pressure. You learn so much from those seasons. Because I think those seasons was where you are in the beginning of the author is saying, you're acting from what you think is supposed to happen. You're projecting what you think. I need to do this, and I need to do this. I think in the seasons where you're trying to do the most, having control of everything, or okay, I did this. Let me try this. You're continuing on trying, and you're getting nowhere because, like again, before all these questions formed, each only thought, I think I know what I'm doing. I think I know what God brought me here for. And then that whole season just feels like a whatever you name it. It's like a discovery. Now that I look back on it, and it was meant to build us. It was never meant to crush us. Like we talked in the early episodes about the potter's hand. And so I'm looking at you guys, and I love the perspective because they're speaking and knowing a little bit details. It's like you would never know what the pipeline years. You never know the pipeline years existed for them. You know, looking at them now, I'm so proud because that's how it's going to look like for many of us right now. Is like I never knew you went through that.
Yeah, very true. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ender, because that's true. You know, a lot of people, you don't, that's the thing, because the author talking about how that was the loneliest, most troubling season, you would have never known.
And I never knew because that house was the happiest house to me. Okay, if you read my books, you'll find out that home was a safe home. To me, when I saw you guys were always having fun. Always like I would never have known that it was the saddest, the loudest, most troubling seasons in your family's life. I was like, I want that family. What do you mean? So this is definitely a perspective of personally going through is so much different from the outside. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Right. Yes.
Never know.
So what we were just talking about here is the author sharing that time in his life, and then now he tells us why this time felt like that. And so the author says, what made that season so confusing was this. I was doing everything I knew how to do. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't irresponsible. I wasn't avoiding my duties. I was working, providing, showing up, trying, praying, hoping, learning, doing all the right things according to the best of my knowledge and understanding. And yet, nothing seemed to work in my favor. Raise your hand if you feel like that sometimes. Yeah, 2 hands. And that's this right here. The author is telling us the biggest frustration, the biggest reason why he felt stuck, and that wasn't because he wasn't doing anything. That was because he was doing everything according to the right way, the way it should be. And still, nothing seemed to work out in his favor. You ever have one of those days where it's just like one thing after the other? Like nothing can go right. You start the day off, you know, your sock is wet, you can't find your shoe, you get in your car and it's on E. Now you have to go to the gas station. You get to the gas station, you forgot your card at home. It's just nonstop. Then you get on the road. Now it's traffic. All this exit's closed off, and just everything can go right.
And you're just trying to go to work.
And you're just trying to go to work so that you can go and do a job. You're not even on your day off, like everything. And that's just a bad day, a bad day. But imagine this being your life, being in a season like that, where it feels like nothing is working in your favor. You can't win. You can't win. You can't catch a break. I know I've had seasons in my life where something is just nonstop. And I'm like, man, I can't catch a break. It's just nothing's going my way right now. And so the author is speaking to that frustration saying, not because I'm not doing the things I'm supposed to, but because I'm doing everything, nothing's working, nothing's going my way. And I'm frustrated reading that. So just imagining all this place of frustration that the author is, that this is pouring from, and him continuing to say, no doors open, no momentum came, and no breakthrough arrived. Kim, you want to read that?
Yes. It felt as though effort no longer produced results, and that kind of reality slowly wears a person down. Not loudly, but quietly. You stop asking big questions. You stop dreaming dreams. You stop expecting change. You begin measuring success simply by survival.
I made it through today. That's a win. You begin measuring success simply by survival. That first line that you read, it felt as though effort no longer produced results. We live in a world where, it's all about efforts, it's all about the results tied directly to your effort. How much you work, that leads to if you get promoted or not, or that leads to how much, the amount on your paycheck. And so everything we lie to ourselves, and we believe in that everything comes because of our efforts. So if I work really, really, really hard, if I go all out, the results should be up here. And so when that doesn't work, when that formula is not working, we automatically assume failure. Us as people, we automatically assume that as a personal failure.
And that goes exactly to the first part of the author's chapter, where it says, for many years, I believe that identity was something that you proved, right? All the things that you're saying. And he thought that becoming someone was a destination I would arrive at once I had done enough to deserve it.
Yeah.
And that,
Very good.
man, we've all gone through something like that. My own, so the years, you guys called yours the pipeline years. I called my years the 10th place. Okay, hold on.
Not the 10th place. How she named it, okay?
Okay, I was trying to not say the title, but that was a title that kind of came about because I moved into our home. I was 10 years old, into my house, and our home was like only 5 minutes apart. But anyhow, I should have named it after the address. I don't know what I did. But I lived in a 10th place because when I moved in at 10, that was where childhood trauma began for me. And I lived in a house for 23 years. 23 years. And that was the seasons when I met my husband, we were dating at the time, and we got married. He decided to come into the house and help take care of me and my mom. And then slowly throughout the years, we just watched our siblings leave, one by one leaving. And so, which was not the problem until later on as the years is going through. Because we, as young couples, it's like we're not making great financial choices. We're getting ourselves into debt. We're just figuring out all these things that no one taught us, nor did we take to teach ourselves, because we were, we're thinking, again, acting on our own efforts. And so those were the saddest years for me, because like you said, men carry so much burden, especially if you are the provider of your home. My husband always says, what am I doing? Is this going to provide for my family? Every thought that he does, every action that he does, always come back to that sentence, to the author. It's like coming here and all these bills. And so I definitely understand how that must feel. But the reason why I called it 10 plagues is because everything happened in the house, not just the childhood trauma. There are moments that this tree almost fell on our house, and then someone came, and the next day literally came and fixed it. There was a moment, I remember our heater broke, and then the worker came and said, I'm surprised this house didn't blow up. We had so much of these moments that I was just like, God, you're literally the only person holding these foundations in this house together. Because that's just a little bit. And so that's why I called it a 10 plagues, because after everything amazing happened, I still found a way to complain about the next thing. And so eventually, we had a boys there. We were able to have a boys. But just the saddest part for me, my husband, was that we felt like everything good was happening for other people. We were in a season where we finally got our life together. We were finally able to pay off our debt. it still didn't matter. Our efforts felt like it was worth for nothing. It was like, why did we do all these things? And making sure that we were set up for this, and we still can't do the things that we want to do. But then people were coming in new cars, people were getting new homes. Our friends were, succeeding in the ways that we wanted to in our own eyes. Eventually, I mean, my husband was like, something that he didn't do often unless it was he needed to be done. The yard didn't need to be done, but I just remember him outside and he was working and he was cutting the trees and I remember that was that was a new behavior for me because there was nothing wrong with the tree at the time. So I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I don't know, but I have a feeling God's telling me to take care of what we have." And if you know our house, that house was falling apart from the left to the right. Everything was falling apart. But he just felt like God gave me this home, and no matter, we can't look at it from what it looks like to us. And so he was learning to be to have stewardship over what we had. And so, like I said, like the under pressure of seeing it differently, seeing that home as something more beautiful. Though I've looked at it for so many years as it wasn't. So we had to truly change our perspective, and those were the years that, at the end of it, I was like, where I thank God for those years. And when I pray even today, I say, God, thank you for those trials because that built me to today. Being grateful for the little that I have, and also just being grateful for knowing, even if it doesn't look like what I wanted to look like, that God already has something planned that is ahead of me. And so that's what my years was and what I named it.
The 10th place. Look, let me learn from someone else's season. Let me not have a season like that. But that's very true. You once you're on the other side of that season, you really look at it as the forming years. Those were the years that those things were being formed within you, and I don't know if that could have been built without having to go through so much. With the trials, the pressure, being on pipeline. And so those years looking back, it's like, you know what? Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for that time, the time of pressure. But yeah, that's so true. And the author continues to talk about, we see the same thing from the beginning, right? Ever since we started this book, we see the same recurring theme here where the author continues to talk about all of his efforts and how he's been trying. God, I've done everything. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do as a man, as a father, as a husband. I'm doing everything. You're leading me here. You called me here to Fiji. You called me here to the States. I'm coming here. I've left everything. I'm coming here with my family, $300 in my pocket. And here I am, and I'm still frustrated. There's still, all of these efforts, like you read in the previous pages. I thought that my identity was something that was going to be given as a gift, as a prize for all of my efforts. Okay, now tell me who I am. Tell me, what my identity is. Right, right, exactly. Like, I'm gonna do the work, and then I'll see what I'm supposed to be. And so the author is having that battle, and we see him begin to internalize that. And here in the next paragraph here on page 20, he says, during those years, I felt deeply needed, but profoundly unknown. My family depended on me. Life demanded strength from me. Responsibility leaned on me every day. But inside, there was a growing emptiness, a loneliness that came from not understanding why my best efforts were not enough to move life forward. And that right there is a struggle that I know a lot of us deal with. I just want more. I just want better. Isn't there more for me? That guy's getting more. She's over there getting more. And they don't even do half of the stuff that I'm doing. All I want, it's a noble desire to move my family, move myself forward here. But I'm met at a block. Everything I try yields no fruit. And the only thing that's growing is my frustration, my loneliness, and my responsibilities. That's not fair. Have you ever had those thoughts? That's not fair. Everything is demanding everything from me. Everybody wants something from me, but nobody truly knows me. And that is exactly what the author is talking about here. He says that was the season when frustration turned inward. when confusion became normal, when misunderstanding myself became a silent companion. I didn't realize it then, but I was not failing at life. I was living without clarity of identity. And there it is. Here the the author talks about this season of frustration, that this season here is when his frustration turned inward. Because when you stop looking around at your circumstance for the reason you're frustrated, the most dangerous thing happens and you turn that frustration inward. Maybe it's me. Maybe I suck. Maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe you're like, yeah, you do. maybe like maybe the formula is not right. It's something that I'm doing. I miscalculated. And now that frustration turns inward. Now there's self-doubt. Now there's comparison. And you're looking at your efforts, and now all of that stuff that you're feeling, you're carrying that inside.
Yeah, because we see here on page 16 where the author talks about, in the second paragraph, says, most people don't wake up one morning and decide to lose their way. They drift there slowly, often while doing what looks like the right things. And that's so true. Like the author we see here, coming to America with this dream, have that American dream, and to do all these things, and then being put through life. Here in America, you have to pay bills. You don't just have one bill, you have many bills. Then you have your car bill and all these things, providing groceries. And then slowly the dreamer stops dreaming and all these things are going through life. And now we're met here where it says right there, let me go back to it, where it says, where confusion became normal, when misunderstanding myself became a silent companion. And I think when I read that it's just so sad to hear. When you know someone and you know that this is what was going internally, inside of them, were misunderstanding themselves and going through these seasons where everything that they were going through was starting to turn inward, where it feels like you lose a sense of yourself. Now you don't know who you are. But that's why it's so important, because it says right there in that last sentence on page 20, I didn't realize it then, but I was not failing at life. I was living without clarity of identity. And when we go back to the beginning of chapter 1, and the author says at the very last paragraph, says, but identity doesn't work that way. Identity is not discovered at the finish line. It is the starting point. And that's something that we can have hope in, and know that all of these efforts, all of these things that we're doing to try to provide the result of who we are, our identity, it's not the finish line. It's the starting line. That's where your identity comes. And that's where everything can flow, and everything you do is purposefully. Is once you know, who am I? Who are you? So,
something that you just read there, that when I first read the text, it stuck out to me, and it was the author's intentional use of the word. When that sentence, when he says, misunderstanding myself became a silent companion. And when we think about companion, the word has a positive connotation. It's a nice word. You think about like the dog being man's best friend, and your companion, your pet, somebody you love, or your companion, your partner in life, and you look at that as something that's positive, and this unfortunately is a truth in our lives, is that sometimes that frustration has walked alongside us for so long that it has become our companion. That feeling that way is familiar. So feeling that way is more comfortable. So even if somebody outside of you is voicing that frustration to you, you're not good enough. You messed up. You're the reason we're stuck here. You allow that to have a seat inside of the thoughts of your mind, because it is now a companion. Oh, I recognize that language. I recognize that what you're saying, because I'm saying it every day to myself. And him saying, misunderstanding myself became a silent companion. And I think about how devastating that is for anybody, for whatever it is that you're feeling, for what when you internalize that frustration, and you're blaming yourself because you're seeing that, hey, your effort is not good enough. and you allow those thoughts to take up place within your mind, that's a dangerous place to be. And he says, confusion became normal. Now the normal is the confusion. The normal is the chaos. The normal is being out of order. And so imagine being in that place and being stuck for so long because you can't even recognize it. You can't come outside of yourself and look at the place you are and recognize that, hey, you're just misaligned. You're okay. You're not failing. You just misaligned. And like you said, in the pages here, we saw that who you are, knowing your identity is the starting point. It's not the finish line answer. It's where you begin. And so the author had spent so much, just even the pipeline years only takes up a page and a half on this page, but imagining the years being in that season. That's the thing about seasons. It can be days, it can be weeks, it can be years. Thank God it was not his lifetime. Thank God it was a season. And he's sharing this, and you can see the author's heart here. The reason why this book was made. This person went through something where frustration and misunderstanding, confusion, all those things became a companion in his life. And he had to go through something to recognize it, number one, then change it, to transform that, to be able to come to a place and write about it and reach our listeners right now, whoever you are, whatever it is that you're walking through right now. That's what this book was meant to do. Let this be your companion through what you're going through. See yourself in these pages. Look outside of what's going on right now and know, hey, no, you have not failed. You are not failing. You have just been misaligned. Let's get you back on track. Let's get aligned. And here, let me show you how. And so that right there, when I saw that sentence, misunderstanding myself became a silent companion, that really pierced me reading that, because I felt that.
Yes. And I love as you're speaking because it goes right back to something I said earlier in the intro. A lot of things you're saying, it's like we're taking those emotions as our identity, and that's never meant to ever do that. I think it could be like an alert or way wrong, but it's like I said, we made it a companion for too long that we became too comfortable with it. And the author has said, when a person doesn't know who they are, they borrow the definitions from everywhere else, right? The culture, the success, the titles, the expectations. But even going further than that, he says, we let what we do replace who we are. And then he says, we allow roles to become our worth, and when those roles change or disappear, and so like all the things you're saying, so does our sense of self goes with it.
Yeah.
When we were living in this house, there were so many tears I cried in this house. And there was a couch that I had in the corner of the house where that was I had to have something in the house where this was my safe place. Where it forced myself to rethink everything because I know that I was mentally unstable in those years. So, and my kids did not deserve an angry mom every day. Okay, so I forced myself. That was my time. That was my personal timeout chair. And as I sat in those chairs, I would always try to just think back. Let me go a little bit deeper here. 23 years in this house. Eventually, one time we got a call from the landlord to come and fix our kitchen. And that was the year of COVID. Okay, and as COVID came along, the shipment was taking too long, so we had to move out and stay in a hotel because it was becoming a sacred hazard. And so we stayed in the hotel for 2 months. We were only supposed to be there for 2 weeks. That we ended up there for 2 months. And so the first month, after the 2 weeks passed, we didn't hear anything. We didn't know what was going on with the house, the template season. I was like, oh my gosh, we are homeless. We have nowhere to go. And then eventually we did get a message that we weren't going to have a home. So yeah, I was like, okay, we're homeless. We don't know where to go from here. But what I found that was interesting is that it was the most peaceful that I ever, even though I was worried about where we were going to live at that season, at the end of the 23 years, I just had so much peace of knowing, God, you know what's going to happen. You did not bring me that far in 23 years in this house to make me homeless. I
Yeah.
knew for a fact that was not going to happen for me. And so, staying in that hotel, I took advantage of just unlearning the things that I was teaching myself, and having a plan. All the things we talk about, vision and planning and purpose. That's what I was doing, not understanding, because of all the peace that I was feeling away from that home. And one of the things that really emphasized that for me is that when we went back to the house to grab things that we forgot, and I remember, and I was happy. I was like, when we came to the house, I was finally happy that we left it. But going back to just grab old belongings, I remember pulling in, and my son started crying. So I'm like, oh my gosh, because every time we went back, he was like, he misses his house, right? He just misses what was familiar. He misses his room. He misses his toys. He misses the routine that he had. And I was like, no, Sam, that's okay. We're gonna have a better house. And then he said to me, but I don't. He's like, I was like, plus we can't even move back because the kitchen is broken. There's no walls. We can't live in there. And I remember him crying. He was like, but Mom, I don't care if it's broken. I want my house back. And I remember immediately I said, no, like, there's no way you come back to this house because that's kind of this journey, right? When you finally get away from it, all the things that get away from my thoughts together. But anyhow, long story short, when he said that, I remember that was the fire to stand firm in knowing that God already prepared what was going to happen. So we came back. Towards the 2 months, we had approved to go back into the house, and so that's when I made that chair my home. I was like, no matter what happens, I know that 2 months in the hotel was not for nothing. So I come back and I made that chair in my house. I priority to sit into it anytime I felt disconnected from what I had learned being homeless in that house, in that hotel. And so just being able to, when we came back, we lived in there for 2 more years, but that house was never the same as it was when we left it the first time. And so it's just like all the things to talk about, the refinement, the learning, the unlearning, the growing, the under pressure. Those years I would never forget into what we're talking about today. Why it's so important to know your identity, what not to borrow, and what to make sure you know, like, hey, that's not who you are.
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that, Admiral. I remember when you were going through that time because we were, well, we've been doing life together forever. So, but I remember you were going through that time, just remembering, you know, because we were going through something parallel to what you were going through. I guess God has took us through everything together. But I remember you guys being there and you just not really knowing what was going to happen. Am I going to go back into that home? You know, where we're going to go from here? But I do remember you sharing that testimony, just saying how transformative that short period of time was for you when God took you guys out and then your return, and just how you just shared it wasn't the same. Even though going back into the same old situation, familiar surroundings, but something was different. And that definitely was where you were, what you had learned, and like you said, knowing your identity. You know, because that
was different.
Exactly. That's
different.
It
was the house. It was nicer. It was
right. Exactly. That was the thing that was different. And so, you know, that's like what we talk about. Like you said, a role is not who you are, it's what you do. Yeah. Provider. Yes, you're the provider for our family, but that's what you do. That's not who you are. And so, you know, when we know our identity, then you move, you decide, and you endure differently. You endure differently. And so the author is taking us through that mindset shift, through that change, through that discovery of what's coming. Just like Enner just shared about her discovery. And these things always come when you're under pressure. Like these things, you have to get to that place where that question just comes to the surface. But you know, thank God for this trial that we're reading about right here. And we'll continue here with the author. After he says, you know, I didn't realize it then, but I was not failing at life. I was living without clarity of identity. And we talked about that being misaligned. And because the author here still talks about, you know, because they're still going off of their effort. He's still talking about his effort, how it's not producing any results. And he continues and says, I was chasing outcomes without understanding foundations. I was pursuing purpose without first settling who I was. I was measuring myself by results instead of truth. The pipeline years didn't break me, but they revealed something critical. So I want to go back to that first sentence. I was chasing outcomes without understanding foundations. And you know, in the world we live in today, fast paced, everything's moving quick, bills are moving quicker. You catch yourself doing that, chasing outcomes, chasing the whatever. Yeah, the bottom line of whatever you're working, whatever it is that you're doing, you're chasing that without taking the time to understand the foundations. I was pursuing purpose without first settling who I was. Let me ask you something. How do you know your purpose if you don't know who you are? How do you know the purpose of something if you don't know what it is? If I don't know what this is, it's my first time seeing this, how do I know the purpose of it? How do I know that the purpose of the water inside the water bottle is to quench my thirst, is to sustain my thirst? How do I know that you can open this and drink it? How to access this? If you have a water bottle, it makes no use unless you know how to access the water that's inside it. And so, without understanding the foundation, all you're doing is it's a continuous pursuit of the wind. You're continuing to chase something you can never attain, you can never achieve because you don't understand the foundation. You don't understand the purpose. And so he says, I was measuring myself by results instead of truth. Let me tell you something about results and truth. Results fluctuate. Results tied to your effort. Results fluctuate. So that means that, this day it can be high, this day it can be low. Those things are ever changing. But but the truth doesn't. And so it said the author is saying here, I was measuring myself by results instead of truth. That's a mismeasurement. I was chasing outcomes without understanding foundation, misalignment. And so he says the pipeline years didn't break me, praise God, but they revealed something critical. And I want to talk about the purpose of that word there, revealed. Because this is something that is already inside of you. Yes, you that are joining now, that are watching us right now, it is already inside of you. And it is something to be uncovered, discovered. It is something to be revealed. This is not something that you have to go look for at the bookstore or at your job, or in a relationship. But this is something that was already in you all along. And we talked about that last week. We talked about how God speaks to identity before he gives you an assignment. That he's already calling you before you did anything to have that title. We talked about David being called as the king when he was just a shepherd boy. He didn't do anything kingly yet. He was just a shepherd boy. We talked about all those things that God speaks to your identity before even giving you that assignment. And so that's what we see here is that he says that this time in his life, this season reveals something critical. And does anybody want to read what was revealed?
Yes, doing the right things without understanding who you are will eventually drain you.
Yes. Doing the right thing without understanding who you are will eventually drain you. That's something that we've been talking about from the beginning of this book. That's something that the author has been hammering this entire time and showing us just how drained, because all the frustration that came out of I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I'm going to church, I'm praying, I'm crying, all these things, and without understanding, being misaligned, and seeing how it has been draining him. And so here's the part that comes right after that. It says, and it was there in that emptiness that the question I had avoided for years finally surfaced, not loudly, but persistently. Who am I really? Sometimes, guys, the question you avoid is most often the one that you need. And so here, at the end of all of this, at the end of searching, trying, uncovering, doing, action, 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 at the end of all of this, after all these years, the question I had avoided for years finally surfaced. And he says it was there in that emptiness, not in that promotion that I got at work, not in that role, title, achievement, but it was there in that emptiness that the question I had avoided for years finally surfaced. Who am I really?
Yeah, because when, we talked about it many times, and it's just because the author keeps emphasizing, when you don't know who you are, then you try to do all these other things that other people are doing. You try to copy other people or achieve this success that you think you should be doing, but it's really not who you are. And just like where it says in bold on here that the thing that was revealed, that the pipeline years revealed something critical, was that doing the right things without understanding who you are will eventually drain you. And it's so true because, I know that we can, relate with this, because there's so many times where we are doing all these good things, and you do this, you pick up this task to do, or whatever it is, and then all these good things start adding up, and you're doing it day in, day out, day in, wake up, go to sleep, and you continue doing these things week after week, and eventually it becomes tiring, and then you look back at, wait, why did I do this in the first place? And everything just becomes tired, like effortless. It becomes draining because it's not fulfilling, because you don't know the true purpose of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we talked about that with Ender, discovering her purpose, and then it was easier for her once she knew her identity and who she truly is. It was easier for her to say no to the things that were good. They're not bad things, but to allow someone else to step in and take those roles so she can pursue exactly who she was called to be in her identity. Mm-hmm. And that's something that is just so true. It's so true just for myself. You guys know my story. So, here I am today, and everything we're doing is just so purposefully, and it's so fulfilling. And that's the one thing I keep wanting to emphasize is when you know who you are, everything that you do is, that's your starting point. It becomes fulfilling, every single thing.
And I just want to add on to all of this is that this is not easy for some of us, especially if you have been living your life in a certain way, and then all of a sudden the question comes, what's your identity or who you are? That can be a really under pressure question. I think one of the ways that we know this is our children. For me, my oldest, he's a lot like me in many ways. And so we're teaching our children literally this thing as early as possible, right? Who are you? And the thing is, they don't have to tell us.
Yeah.
We can see it in them. But with one of my sons, I can tell him all the things that he's good at, all the things he's good at. Sam, this is who you are, and I can name it. But if it's not the ones he wants to do, what I find is interesting, the one that he's running away from is the one I know he's supposed to be.
That's how it is.
But he loves all the other ones.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, it's good. God gives you many talents. Yeah. But Sam, the one that you're avoiding the most is the one that is who you are. And so when I read this, when I said understanding who you are will eventually drain you, because it's draining me as a mother. Because every day, one time, literally this week, we woke up early in the morning and said, Sam, meet me at the kitchen table. And I took him to James 1:6. I told him, Sam, you are not away being tossed to and fro. Yeah. You're one moment you're like, oh, this is who I am. Yeah. Okay. The next day, it's like I'm literally speaking to a whole other person. Yeah. And I had to reel him right back in. Sam, come here. Come back here. Come back again. Come again, Sam. This is who you are. This is who you are. But it really is. Just in case if you guys are watching and you're thinking of, is that one thing that you're trying to avoid? That's most likely who you are today. Who you're supposed to become. Yeah, the thing that you need to discover, to pull out of that rug. Exactly. That's probably the thing that you need to discover that you're running away from. Go ahead and walk right into it. Because what I find is interesting is that when it's for you, as soon as you see it, it just comes naturally to you. Yeah. The doors are open. Oh, yeah. It's like the way that we think it's December because of the way that we're moving, but it's only April. Right. Okay, but it's because it's like we're all finding like this is who we are. Yeah. The doors are just opening. But you discover that. So I just want to emphasize that as well, is that we know that it can be challenging for some. Yeah. So let this come and join us every Friday and let this be a place for us to really get back into it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is so funny how you said sometimes the one thing that you're avoiding, that you don't want to do, is the one thing that you and it's exactly who you are. And I know for me myself, my sisters had to really convince me to do this podcast, to get on here. Yeah, you were there. You were literally part of that journey. Watching them trying to convince me to do this, to get on here. And then even when we sat down together and talked about what should we name this podcast, and we were thinking of names, and we came up with the title, What Anna Said. And it really was something that was born way before this, and it had always been a part of our family. Because let me tell you, before there was ChatGPT, there was ChatGPT me. Okay. And so, I mean, within my family. Really. And so it was just so funny how everything came together. And I was like, first, I don't want to do it. Now I'm going to put my name in the title. I really don't want to do it. But it's just so funny how I was supposed to do it, and God was waiting for me to hurry up.
As an outsider, I saw that.
Yes.
Because when we were in church, I'm sorry, I can't
Wait, okay.
But we were in church, or we were growing up, and every time something would happen, I always hear Kim and Sally watching. Always heard that my entire life.
Yeah,
that's a thing that's amongst you guys.
Right.
I know that's a thing amongst you guys. Sometimes I'm not you say other people are saying, oh, but I'm saying.
You're
it's just
right.
Your name was already there before you saw it.
But and see, Anna knows, because like she said, she ran away from it and now here she is. But Anna is literally, like Anna said, before ChatGPT, it was ChatGPT Anna. Okay, it really was Anna. We always loved anything we went through in life, whatever it is. Anna just knew the perfect way to bring us back to ground zero, and whatever it is. So now here she is.
That's a hard job, you guys.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you.
And just like Edner, I wanted to touch up on that. Like Edner said, it's usually the thing you're running away from. And speaking from my experience, it definitely was, because I remember, I've always been well with kids and things, and just growing up, I was like, I'm not gonna do that. My dad's like, you need to have a daycare, or you need to do something with kids, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, Dad, yeah. Anyways, now here we are, little champs, and with all the kids, and I love it. I enjoy it. I flourish with them. They're like, we just get each other. Me and kids just get each other.
And you guys, I sat through that moment as well.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. I remember when my sister came to good with me. I don't think I even heard that yet. I didn't know that she was good with children. As we were having our fellowship, when we came back into my house, as I came into a new perspective, I came into it as a new person, same house, different person. That's when we started the fellowship.
Yeah.
And so if you guys have not watched me, that's kind of how I connected into this group. But anyhow, I saw that. I remember we came join, she was there, but she wasn't there in the very beginning. And then one day she came as a whole new person. And it was like a little child, the shyest kid in the room that always raised her hand, like, I'm working with children. I'm like, oh, perfect. And I just remember your sisters all rolled their eyes. I did told you that,
Yeah.
But that was when you know who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to see the personality change.
Exactly. And I want to add to what Kim was saying earlier, how you were, and even the author talks about it here, about doing all the right things and being drained by it. And we keep going back to that, guys. Misalignment, doing things when you're misaligned is more exhausting than hard work. It is. It's more exhausting because you're doing things in your own efforts, and you're doing the things that are not you, that are not, part of your identity, who you are, who you were created to be. You're doing the things of who you constructed your identity to be. And a constructed identity will always leave you drained, frustrated, tired. When you are operating on who you were created to be by the Creator, that hard work, everything that you're doing, because that draining frustration that we talked about, it no longer exists because you are now aligned, and you are not being sustained by momentum, doing action, moving, but you are being held, and that is what's sustaining you. It's not that all of a sudden you can breathe underwater.
Yeah.
No, you can't. It's
fish.
Thank you for making that point. I didn't want them to be confused about that. But yeah, it's not because now you have gills underwater, but it's because you now understand your purpose for being underwater. You now understand that you are being formed. You now understand exactly who you are and who you are called to be. Sometimes, you look at your lives and ask yourself, am I well, first of all, ask yourself that question, who am I really? And even the things that you're doing, are you doing what you're being called to do, or you're just doing what you're capable of doing? Because let me tell you, a lot of the things that I'm doing, I never thought I was capable of. It's very much God. It's very much God.
That's what I'm saying.
God gave me no choice for some of these things. But it's a real thing. It's a real truth. It's a real question that you definitely need to ask yourself, our viewers, even us ourselves walking through this together. And so a question that I do have for our viewers is, what would change in your life? Okay, so what would change in your life if you were absolutely clear on who you are? So if you were absolutely sure, you were absolutely clear on who you are, who you were created as, what would change in your life? Or what needs to change in your life? And so that's just not a question for you. That's a question for us too. Is what would change in your life? What needs to change in your life when you're absolutely clear of who you are? So here we've come to the end of this portion that the author is sharing with us about the pipeline years. We see him talk about that conflict, that frustration. We see him talk about giving into the lies, giving into the confusion, the misalignment. And we see that all of those things, being drained by it, feeling stuck, feeling lonely, feeling crushed, all those things have led him to this one question that revealed itself. He had to go through this entire season so that question bubbled up to the surface, where he had that moment with himself asking, who am I really? And so the rest of this chapter goes into all of that, and it's so very exciting and it's so very important. But before we go to we're going to save that part of the chapter for next week. But we want to leave you with that question that we just talked about, which is, what would change in your life if you were absolutely clear on who you are? I'm so excited for everybody to start thinking about that, to ask yourself that, to reflect on that, and sit with that question. Sit with it for some time. We're going to be back here next week, Friday. We're going to pick back up. We're going to ask each other the same question, and we're going to dive into the words on these pages and how we are walking alongside each other through this journey, learning these things, applying these things, and we invite you to join us again next week. So please, save your page if you're following along with us. We are leaving off on page 21. So save your spot in the page with us. We'd love to hear from you. Please come back. Talk to us here in person. We'll be here at Dos Amores, 11:30 every single Friday. We love getting to hear everyone's stories. So either if you want to share them with us in person, share them with us online. We can't wait to hear from you. Thank you for following along on this journey. And we'll catch you guys on another episode of What Anna Said Podcast.
Bye. All right.
Thank you, everyone,
Yes.
for tuning in. Even though our mics don't work,
I'm so sorry.
you're fine. They're gonna work next week.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.